takes that you put, the bloopers.
Oh yeah.
They're like shorten it.
Wait, is this in
They were nice. I mean, that's what they said, but they were nice. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair ask. That's what I'm gonna say.
I mean, it's at the end of the episode, but yeah, that's fair. Feedback is good. We like feedback. Hello, viewer / listener. Welcome to Break, Fall Through After Show. This is Break for Fall Through episode 51, which is kind of crazy. We're almost at the year mark. But yeah, Matt and I were just talking about the New Jersey versus Massachusetts ideologies and EVs and dependency management, a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, I feel like that was a good conversation. I enjoyed that conversation.
I did too. I like break because it gives us a chance to like pause between talking about this stuff and collect our thoughts, and then lets our minds like ruminate on what we've just discussed, and then like we come into break and we can talk a little bit more about it. So I like this format, and I like the topic. There's lots to say there, and you know you're trying not to like shit on Go, right? And be like, you're bad, Go, blah blah blah. But it is a good case study, and it's something that we're close to. We were in the community, we've used the language, and we've seen it. So I think it's a good case study, and I think it'll relate to our listeners as well. They'll be able to see the parallels there. You know, this is not like, you know, modules suck and you should feel bad. It's just more of like, here's where I think we went wrong and how that line of thinking changed. And, you know, it's important. I think it is important to have. I've been reading, like I think I mentioned on an earlier episode, I've been reading the book Range. It's a good book. And like, this is where it kind of comes from. Like, you have to have that sort of range of skills and ideas and thinking to not narrowly focus so much and be correct. You have to like understand the domain you're operating in and the domains around you and solve for the entirety. And I think that's like the essence of the New Jersey sort of way of thinking is, let's see really what matters and what doesn't. And then once we know what matters and what doesn't, we can solve the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you see like C more dominant than something like Lisp, right? Because they were like, we have a real problem to attach C to. Like, that's the problem right there. I'm tired of writing assembly. I'm tired of this. I'm going to write C, you know, and this is why. And
right.
And like, when you have that, when you can attach that problem so directly to what your solution is targeting, that creates some level of lasting effect, right? Because people are going to rally around that and be like, oh yeah, actually, Matt, like C, I love it. I hate writing assembly too. Yeah, thank you for doing this C thing. You know, I have some thoughts here, blah, 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 blah. And then that's how it gets built up. And I feel like you felt that same way with Go, right? It's like, oh yeah, my CPUs are like, I'm like not using them. I have all these cores now and I'm just not doing anything with them. It's idle. My system is idling at 30%. Like, I could be using this all the time. And you rally around that and you're like, yeah, Go's doing this for me. Got it. And like, that's awesome. But it's not a one-time thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, when you identify a problem and you solve for it, that's fine. You've identified it, you solve it. But the environment's going to change, right? Like, as you use the solution and as the environment changes, new problems will arise. And your original sort of approach and hypothesis and solution might need to be modified for the new environment. And I think that's where we're at with Go, with GitHub, with electric cars, with whatever, like name another example, right? I think we're just at that sort of inflection point where the original idea of solving for this has shifted, and now we need to kind of adapt along with it.
Yeah, I do think that like probably the biggest problem, and the reason why I find modules so frustrating, but also like why I find this whole EV thing so frustrating as well, is because both like battery electric vehicles and modules are kind of pushed and almost forced onto the world as like the solution. And like, I think that's where, of all of the ways in which, you know, modules and other things depart from Go's ideology, that's where it departs the most. Because when you look at Go from like a foundational standpoint, right? Go from the beginning has had multiple compilers. It's enabled you to have multiple different types of tool chains. There's been, from the early days, multiple different like runtimes and standard libraries, right? We have standard Go and we have tiny Go. Those are two different implementations of Go. And like Go itself, if you want to build something and call it Go, all you have to do is follow the spec, right? You can have Go that doesn't have a runtime. Runtime is not a requirement of Go. You can have a version of Go that doesn't have automatic garbage collection. Memory management is not mentioned nowhere in the specification. So you could write a manually memory managed version of Go, or a version of Go that has allocators like Zig has, and use that type of pattern with it, right? There's nothing stopping you from doing those things. The thing that modules did, though, is it said there will be one solution, and that one solution will be modules. And that is so out of character for Go as a whole, which invites in all of these different ways of doing things. And I think that's also what has frustrated me all of these years, is that it's like, if modules is not fitting what I need to do, having an alternative is extremely painful.
Right.
And like, I still don't understand why we couldn't have built modules as a separate thing. Why it couldn't have been another tool you run, or maybe like an optional tool that wasn't baked so heavily into the main Go tool chain. Because, you know, at the end of the day too, like, it came out of Google, which is really weird, because this is the sticking point that Dylan always brings up. It was like, Google internally does not use modules because modules are not compatible with Blaze. So they use Blaze, which is their build system, and they have to use like all the low-level Go tools themselves in Blaze to make it all work, because they don't want to use modules. So they put in all of the effort to not use modules, which does mean, in effect, like, this thing that I want to do of like building a better dependency management solution is something we can do as a community, right? We don't have to accept modules just because they're baked so heavily into the Go tool chain. We can just build other tool chains and we can pick up and use those. And we don't have to implement a whole new compiler, because you can still just use the regular compiler with it. And I think like that's really the sticking point at the end of the day with all of this, with like, it wouldn't matter if modules was an incorrect solution if we weren't all forced to use it. It wouldn't matter if the underpinnings of the correctness of modules was like, is incorrect. It wouldn't matter if we weren't all forced to use it, because we would have an option, an easily accessible option to use something different. And like, the constraining of what people can do, that is the thing that I think makes people want to pick up and leave this language. It's because like, you're being told what's good for you. You're being told what you can do. And like, that ain't what people came here for. People came to get away from that type of stuff.
I think that's it. I think that's it. Only took us a year to get here. I think that's it though. Like, even when you apply it to electric vehicles, I think that's the same idea, is that you're telling drivers that this is the thing you're able to use, and this is the only thing you should be using. But the difference there is there's alternatives, and they're choosing, like, drivers are choosing the alternatives, right? Because they're weighing the options and saying, actually, no, I don't want this electric thing because I've weighed the options for me and my family and my usage, and this is wrong for me, right? And you're seeing it. Like, look at all the auto manufacturers. Their electric sales are tanking, right? In the US. In other countries, it's different. But in the US, they're like, nah, man, you didn't convince me. Sorry, try again later. But in Go, same kind of idea in Go, there was just no alternative, right? Or at least no easily accessible alternative like there is in the automobile world. I can go buy a gas car right now if I need one. I'm not forced to go buy an electric car,
right?
But I'm basically almost forced to use modules. It's going to be very hard for me not to use modules. I have to do a lot of work myself to not do modules in Go. And I think that is the crux of the issue, is you're telling people what to do and you're enforcing them to do it that way. Yeah. And that's a problem. People don't want that. They want, even if it's just an illusion, they want choice.
And I think too, we miss out on like here's one of the interesting things, right? Like, electric cars are vastly cheaper in China. And like, the reason they're cheaper, I watched a video on this, was really fascinating. Like, the reason they're cheaper is partly because the part of the vehicle fleet that they electrified first was not consumer cars, but was like fleet vehicles. So they could use what at the time was an inferior battery technology called lithium iron phosphate. And lithium iron phosphate is much cheaper, uses much fewer precious metals, So you wind up with like a cheaper battery. It just didn't have the same capacity. It wasn't as dense as lithium ion, which is what we use for electric cars in the US. But over time, they just dumped time and energy and research into making these LFP batteries better and better and better and better. And now they're, within 90% of the capacity of lithium ion, but they cost like a third or less. So they cost substantially less, which is why you can buy like a $8,000 EV or something like that in China, right? You can buy extremely cheap EVs in China because they were like, oh, they took the long-term approach and were like, oh, this is something we should do. And like, it's hard to do that in America if you're focused on battery electric vehicles, because like people are going to buy one and they're going to have it for a long time. So they're going to have as much capacity as possible. But if you do a whole bunch of EREVs, right, you could theoretically design a platform that has a exchangeable battery, and you could say, okay, well, make it compatible with many different battery chemistries, and we can start developing better battery chemistries over the years. And once again, like if you're only getting 40 miles instead of 80 miles, you don't really care that much because you can just go to the gas station and fill up on fuel, right? So it would have allowed us to start experimenting with a whole bunch more different battery technologies, perhaps lighter batteries, perhaps more solid state batteries, just trying to do all different types of stuff. That's really hard to do when the battery is your only option, right? When you don't have another option, you're going to go with the thing that you know is going to work. Because if you don't go with the thing that works, if you go out on the limb, it doesn't work, people are going to be mad at you and they're not going to buy your stuff anymore. So it's like it's like opening the space for experimentation, making it possible for people to experiment is extremely important. And that applies to all of this stuff. And I think that's what we should all be focusing on and enabling people to do, is like do more experimentation, do more exploring. It's one of the things that like LLMs give us the ability to do. It's like now you can actually explore and understand and learn more things, because for some of the stuff in this episode, I was like sitting down with Claude and I was just like having a conversation with it, thinking through all of this different stuff. And I was like, hey, can you go do some like research on this to like see if I'm right about this? Like, here's what I think. Can you go do some research? And it went and looked at like 300 sources or whatever, and it came back and I read a report for me. Like, I could have done that work myself, but it would have taken me like 2 days to go read through a bunch of stuff and try to parse it and understand it and all of this. And it's like, is that a good use of my time? Probably not. Like, should I go and like, now that it's giving me some places to look, I should probably go read some of those sources, go understand those things. But it's like that vastly sped things up and made it so I can experiment, I can learn more things, I can do more things. It's a tool that enables you to do more. Doesn't necessarily replace people, but allows people to do more things. I think whenever you allow people to do more things, to experiment more, that winds up good for everybody, right? Like, the thing that tells me at the end of the day that things like dependency management, like things like Semver, things like modules, even things like Git, right? The thing that tells me that those are not optimal solutions is that there's just a presumption that you have to use those things. You don't use those things because you want to use them. You use those things because you're basically told you have to, right? And like, we're finding ways to get out from under this. Like JJ is allowing us to get out from under that with Git, right?
Get under. Sorry.
there's things with some of the ideas that I've been bringing up can help us get out from under semantic versioning. And of course, there's ways we could do the same thing for modules. And there's the same way you can do things for, it's easier in other languages, right? Famously, like you had NPM and then you had Yarn, right? That allowed them to have a new model, a new way of doing things. It's so ironic that it's a JavaScript ecosystem that is like championing a lot of this, like
even at the runtime layer, right? And not even just Yarn and whatnot. It's even like Node Dino Bun. Look at Bun.
Yeah.
Classic, or not classic, but like great example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if you locked people into Node solely as the runtime, would JavaScript have died? I don't know. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that. It is kind of wild that all roads lead to JavaScript.
They really do. And of course, JavaScript is the worst form of dependency hell that has ever existed, because boy, do they have a lot of dependencies. And
there's like no good standard library there. You have to just use dependencies for everything.
Yeah, and I think too, like one of the things I thought about when I was thinking about all of this is that when it comes to Go, we already had this ethos of like dependencies are a pain in the ass to deal with, have fewer of them. And I think that was actually a good ethos for us to have. And that would have, that's one of the things that uniquely about our community that would have uniquely allowed us to adopt this kind of alternative way of doing dependency management. Because I think people use dependency managers and they're like, oh, I should be able to grab this dependency and you should figure everything out for me. And I think that is probably part of the problem. And with like the solutions I was suggesting, your dependency management tool is not going to do everything for you, right? It can't possibly do everything for you. There's the idea that it can do everything for you is a freaking illusion. And like, we should stop like looking at the mirage because it's absolutely silly. Like whether things are compatible with each other is something that needs to be discerned like at some point by a human of saying like, has this functionality changed or not? Because module like package library authors make mistakes all the time where it's like, oops, I accidentally made this thing incompatible and I didn't mean to. And it's like, okay, well then how do we resolve around that? How do we make it so the system can still work? And you just need a way of talking about these things, a way of after the fact saying, actually, this version that we made, it did have this breaking change, and here's where that breaking change is. And actually having an ecosystem that allows us to do that and allows us to have this kind of conversation with our dependencies instead of it just being like an algorithm that solves a mathematical problem, right? And I think Go could have been a language that could have started that because once again, we were a very low dependency like programming language because all we had was Go Get for a long time. And just because of, the standard library being pretty robust. So it's like, oh yeah, you could have like, done something that would have made dependencies a pain, but would have gotten us on the road, right? It would have been the lithium iron phosphate approach to dependency management, right? In the early days, not nearly as good as the standard stuff out there, but I think it would have had the potential to actually become better than the tools that are out there. In the same way that Go Vulncheck is a much better way of understanding security vulnerabilities than pretty much anything else that we have out there. And the way that the analysis tooling that we have in Go is top notch compared to most languages. Like the ability for you to write a static analysis tool is so easy in Go. And the ability to run it the ability to add it to static check or any of those, so freaking easy because they built the infrastructure to do it. And the language gives you all the tools you need to be able to do that thing, to analyze your code, to understand your code, to do things with your code. Like it would have been rough in the early days, but I think it would have led to a beautiful system that would have enabled us to actually have, at the end of the day, a secure supply chain and a way to actually produce things like bill of materials that are actually like correct and actually do identify the exact versions of things that you're using, right? Like it would have allowed us to position Go not just as like the language of the cloud, but the language of secure supply chains. And if Go becomes the language of secure supply chains, usage would have shot through the roof. Because as we learned from the past, people are willing to overlook some of the deficiencies if the thing they really want is there. Right, that happened with concurrency. There were a lot of things. People complain about generics. People complain about error handling. But trying to write concurrent code in other languages is awful. And writing it in Go is substantially better. And it could have been like that for all of our dependencies. It's like, yeah, sure, maybe this doesn't have some niche feature you really like, but your supply chain, right? The security vulnerabilities are almost non-existent. The supply chain is great, right? You could have had things about Go that would have positioned it to push another revolution forward. And again, there's nothing stopping us from doing this now. So we should do it.
It's just a matter of who the we is.
Yeah. Definitely the community. I don't think this is the thing the Go team should. I don't think it's a good use of their resources. I also don't think they're in a good position to do this, which is something we don't really talk about either, of like the fact that Google, when it uses Go, does not use modules and has their own esoteric dependency system and build system, means that there was no way for the Go team to get like immediate feedback, right? They had to go out to talk to people in the community to understand what the needs were. They didn't have an in-house source of those needs. And it's still true today, right? So it's like, they're not going to be the ones that are going to build us a great dependency management tool. Like it's going to have to come from the community where it was originally coming from in the first place, right? People had problems, people built solutions. That's the same thing we should be doing now. People have problems, we should build solutions. And through those solutions, we will come to a good solution that works for everybody.
I mean, it's kind of never been easier to build your own solutions with AI, right? So what's
Yeah,
really the excuse now? You
it's
can
true.
just, I mean, I wonder if you could probably just feed it the Go spec and be like, hey, implement this, making these changes. You probably could.
I mean,
You should probably, it probably wouldn't do the
there's no
whole thing, but
spec changes that you need to make. I mean, that's the beauty here, right? There's no. I
well, yeah. I was saying like implement this, and then like when you implement this part of the spec, I'd like the behavior to be this or something, or I like to focus on
yeah.
this aspect.
But
Yeah.
like it's like you don't need to. You can still use a standard Go runtime. You can still use a standard Go compiler. You can still use a standard library. It's just like instead of Go build, you run this other tool, and the other tool can invoke the Go toolchain, or it can be built with, from the main Go repository or excuse me, whatever. But I think the big thing is that like it is possible to do this, and I think that Go build was already has always been an insufficient build tool, right? We've always needed like make files or shell scripts or mage files or some other thing to actually do builds, because the Go tool is not good at building complex things. And it's like we could start creating something that actually enables us to do more complex builds for Go specifically, that can also do this dependency stuff, all this. Like we can build the tooling that we need and make it pluggable and make it like more functional and usable for what we want to do. And so I think that's the thing. Like, Go build is kind of rough. Go modules are rough. And we should at least entertain the idea that we could build something better.
Yeah. No, I agree. Should we tease our GitHub sort of discussion?
I don't know what there's to tease about because we don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but
Or should we say like what we think
Okay.
is going to happen?
Sure.
Mainly. I think we have an idea. We just don't have concrete things.
Right. Go for it.
I'm over GitHub. I mean, like again, we kind of hinted to it in the episode, but like the sentiment around GitHub has been pretty poor lately as well. Not even just from like me or whatever, but just in general. They've been having outages pretty frequently. They're like kind of appearing old now, right? Like with this sort of AI assisted coding setup that we have today, GitHub's sort of PR flow is feeling a little dated without the ability to like review revisions, like force push revisions or stack diffs or all this stuff. You probably, if you're on social media in the tech world, you've probably heard stack diffs in the last week or whatever. And like, it's funny because GitHub's always been like this. They've had people have been asking for things like this for so long, and now it's kind of came to a tipping point. It's pretty funny. And really the little catalyst around it was their sort of GitHub Actions pricing changes that they announced and then reverted. And people were just like, wait a minute. It's funny how like an unrelated announcement could put you under the spotlight of something.
Right.
And now GitHub people that use GitHub are like, wait, you're changing our Actions pricing. Oh no, you're not. And hold up. Why do I use GitHub again? What do y'all do? You still don't have stack diffs? Like what's going on? It's reminded people about like things that they've been kind of upset with GitHub about. And I think we'll have a nice chat about all of this and sort of what the future could look like if somebody were to replace GitHub.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's like, once again, it's a lot like, Garrett's been out there for years. Garrett has pretty much always been a superior tool to GitHub. That's much more aligned with like how Git was intended to be used. But it's nice when you have like a thriving ecosystem of different, people trying to build different things, right? The fact that we all depend on GitHub or GitHub-like systems is kind of it's been unfortunate for a long time, and I'm glad that we're finally starting to have the push to change that up, to break down this monopoly, and to actually have a place to push our code that does more for us. I guess is also an example of I want to be the one ecosystem for everything, where GitHub, it hosts your code and your issues and your community and does your builds and it's like it tries to do everything, and it's not doing a good job at most of those things.
Yeah, GitHub issues kind of suck. Like they're pretty bad, especially when you want to view them in a more project management way. Bad. Actions, it's fine. It's kind of cumbersome to use in a way, but it's fine. And then like the whole code thing, kind of unchanged. It's just, it hasn't changed. It hasn't grown with the times. And why is it that my large diffs won't render? When you tell me to check out the code locally to view a diff, why don't you just do it? Like displaying 20,000 lines in a browser is really not that hard. I don't understand. But
yeah,
it is what it is. I think we're in a pretty, I don't know, we're in an interesting area. We're in an interesting era of software engineering. I think like tools are about to change again.
Yeah.
You know, like I know we've only looked at it in the past of like GitHub's introduction into the industry. And it was like a whole mind blowing thing of like, whoa, GitHub, this whole thing, this is so cool. But we're in an area now where I think change is upon us. We're going to see some of the tools that we've grown up with and loved and whatnot. I think we're going to see them either change radically to fit this new sort of modern development, or I think they'll be replaced if not careful.
Right.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to see how that all shakes down, because not that I want like, I'm not sitting here saying like everything that's bad should go away. That's not what I'm saying. But when you don't change with the times, I can't feel bad for you anymore. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that works out. I'm excited to talk about that with you, and I think potentially Steve. So.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, with that, I think it's a good place to close out. Well, Matt,
The happiest of holidays.
Happiest of holidays. Yeah, and thank you, viewer/listener, for sticking with us till the end. How'd you like that little, addendum conversation to our larger conversation? Once again, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and social media, and Zulip, and Slack, or wherever you might find your fall through or break post. This episode of Break featured Kris Brandow and Matthew Sanabria. Break is a Fallthrough Media production and produced by Kris Brandow, and our beat by Breakmaster Cylinder. And done.
We did it.